that's also very predominant right now, especially in Oklahoma City, is March Madness.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the part of it is because of the influence of Thunder. I mean, March Madness was big before Oklahoma City Thunder came to town. Because OU always made it into, almost always made it Sweet 16. Okay. OSU showed up.
The girls.
But when now, because of Thunder, basketball is so much bigger, that they're even rerunning and old stories. I just saw a story about Effie, who is the ghost in Skirvin. And it's her impact on basketball. Effie is the sixth player because the Lakers can't stay at the Skirvin anymore because Effie ran them off.
And see, that's funny how like they use that as a metaphor to talk about, or they use that as a sign or symbol to say, oh, well, they ran us off because of this influence. And as far as like, when you're talking about how Oklahoma City, or the Thunder, or what made March Madness, before, Oklahoma people could not identify with one team. Now it's Thunder Nation. And that what helps us identify as, oh, we're Thunder fans, we're Thunder Nation. But before, we didn't have a team that we could identify with. It was you split and chose your own team. But now it's like, well, you're in Thunder Nation now. Everybody loves Thunder. So it's kind of like they brought this culture, and now if you like basketball and you're from Oklahoma, you're obviously a Thunder fan. And if not, then...
Unless you're being your Lakers fan.
Oh, well. See, but how do you identify that when people are like, oh, you're from Oklahoma, you must love the Thunder? Or they like bring it up. How do you segue into...
Well, I'm very biased because I think a lot of Thunder fans
Or bandwagon?
Yeah. But I don't know, I've always just loved the Lakers. So, but that's just how if somebody's like, oh, you're a Thunder fan, I'm like, no. I mean, I love the Thunder, they're a great team and they have good players, but it's just not something.
And to me, like I grew up in Michigan, so I've always been a Detroit Pistons fan, just because we had a team.
Yeah.
But I find it very difficult to live in Oklahoma and not somehow relate to Thunder or feel like I should have pride for the Thunder because of how they're performing.
Such a big influence. It's everywhere.
And so, you know, I find myself watching the Thunder, and granted the Pistons aren't in it anymore, but
Pistons of the past.
I do find myself caring about the players on the team because it now, I guess I now kind of identify as someone who lives in Oklahoma, and therefore I should care about this team that is a sign of progress for the state.
Yeah, even if I'm not particularly much of a basketball fan at all, but I am aware of the Thunder. When I look to go to Oklahoma City at this time of year and a little earlier in the year, you have to be aware of what the Thunder schedule is. If you're going to plan on staying anywhere near the center of Oklahoma City. It's just like during football season. If you're going to go to Norman, don't try to stay in Norman on a football weekend.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. That was always our big sporting thing before the Thunder, because we didn't have a professional team. And we're so close to Denver, Kansas City, and Dallas, okay, which all had both basketball and football teams. And then we had the hockey team.
Do you think that Oklahoma, like the Thunder, now kind of helps create the culture that exists, like around sports in Oklahoma? Do you think it was there before, or do you think that the Thunder has helped enhance the idea of culture surrounding sports?
There's other professional, like there's a WNBA team for Tulsa or something, isn't there?
The shop.
Yeah, the shop.
And but we don't ever talk about that. Like, but I think maybe Thunder has considered it.
Thunder has
Sports
the
in
money
Oklahoma.
to influence us.
Yeah.
Yes,
This is where power
that's what I was
of
just about to bring
influence
up.
comes in.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, because we now have a team, that it means that our state is progressing, like you mentioned that. So we kind of equate sports and that money to power, even though we still are very far behind politically with the rest of the world. And as far as like educational, like if you look at our test scores
Yeah.
and stuff like that, we're still behind, but
But we
we
have the
see
Thunder.
having this team.
Yeah,
and
that's so
seeing-
important.
That's
Yeah.
so important, and then we equate it to power.
Mhm.
Like, how did we get there from taking, education used to be highly important, and being politically aware and stuff like that is something that we strive for, but we equate, we now have a team, so our state is progressing, which, that's what I think of as, we're doing so good, we got a team.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
But I mean, what in our society leads us to these conclusions? Like, why do we place so much importance on besting one another? Because it is, like, in YouTube, the whole point of YouTube is to gain pleasure from someone else's misfortune. If you see these fail videos, you see these people getting hurt in the genitals, suffering injury, and yet we find it entertaining. Like, we must always best someone for that power. It's a constant power struggle no matter what.
Yeah. And if our icon at the moment, right now it's Thunder, is doing well, and as long as Thunder is doing well, that is going to be the main emphasis.
And we identify with that, because
Yeah.
if Thunder's doing well, Oklahoma's
Oklahoma's
doing
doing
well.
Right.
And if Oklahoma's doing well, since we live here, we should
We're
be doing well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if the Thunder starts doing badly, okay, we will shift focus. And in the fall, when we don't worry so much, I mean, half the state doesn't even pay attention to gubernatorial elections if there's a good OU Texas game coming.
It is. We value, in Texas, they say sports are religion and sports are life. If you don't play these sports as young men, if you don't play football, you're not a young man. And why, and like if, as we talked about earlier, if you're a woman and you play sports, you're overly masculine. You're a jock. You are a lesbian. You aren't soft. Because your body's not soft, because you have to put it through so much, so you automatically get that masculine feature.
But one of the hardest sports, really physically difficult sports, isn't even considered a sport because they dress feminine while they do it. And that's cheerleading.
Yeah. Even though
Cheerleading.
it's really hard for me to call cheerleading a sport because of my societal views.
Right.
That it was considered frilly. And it's hard for me to think of it as a support since it started as a way to support the masculinity and focus on the masculinity of a sport such as football.
Well, see, there's been an evolution in cheerleading over the last
Yeah, more
20
competitive
years.
cheerleading, more.
There's much more competitive. Cheerleaders have become this competitive group that, they show up with football teams to get sponsorship, basically. But it's the pep squads that do what the cheerleaders used to. The pep squads are the ones that are jumping around all over the place, up in the stands and are at all the assemblies. The cheerleaders come out, do their thing, move on, and are back at practice. Though they are, to be a cheerleader today is to be a gymnast. Okay? And you're doing it, and one of the hardest parts about being that kind of gymnast is you don't get the safety equipment that gymnasts get.
Do you think that it's changing perception though? Culturally? Because I think that there's still a stereotype.
Oh,
with
yeah.
Cheerleaders, that obviously you guys saw my face.
Yeah, like,
Cheerleaders.
it's really hard for me to call cheerleading a sport.
Right, it is for me too, because I grew up playing, I was a gymnast, But there was a clear difference between being a gymnast and a cheerleader.
And you wanna know why? The sexuality in
Correct.
cheerleading. The dances that have to be hip hop or upbeat and the hip thrusting and the hair flipping. To gymnasts, it's about strength and power
Correct.
and doing your routine correctly. For cheerleading, it's about pizzazz, landing a trick, but we are encouraging men and women cheerleaders to be sexual, to be entertaining sexual. That's why it's hard for me to consider it a sport. But again, we're considering football, you have to be a strong male, which is sexual. You have to,
You have to have
exude
lots of
power and all that. You
Right,
have to be
and
quick.
And I think even though more men have started to become cheerleaders, because it is becoming more physical of an event.
Still can't call it
Right, I
sport.
can't do it. But you also, we still attribute a man that's a cheerleader as feminine.
Yeah.
We don't expect that someone, even though they
A
have to
masculine
lift
guy.
another human being, we don't agree with the idea that that's gonna be a masculine person.
Well, they get lumped in with the minority. They say, well,
Yeah.
if you're a male cheerleader, you're gay.
Now, see, I left high school teaching in 2010. Okay, I was a high school teacher, I was the stagecraft teacher, which meant I had to set up everything for the assemblies, tear down everything for the assemblies, regardless whether it was in the gym or in the theater. Okay, at that point, at least at the school where I was, which is a very competitive cheerleading squad, ones that went to nationals on a regular basis, there was a distinctive difference between the cheerleader that I grew up with and the cheerleader that was there. They didn't do the hip thrusting dance moves. That's what the pep squad did. Pep squad was actually a bigger group of girls. These girls came out, did their routines with precision. This kind of precision that when in high school, I did gymnastics in high school, too, the kind of precision that was required for high school gymnastics then is required for cheerleading now.
So it seems like it's changed your opinion and your view, but as a culture, do you think we've accepted that?
As a culture, no, because they're still wearing skirts.
We're getting close to the end to wrap it up, but I think like something that we can all take from this is the signs. Like you said, they're still wearing skirts. So even though actually in tennis, they still wear skirts.
But they're competitive.
It's competitive, it's support. But you hear all the societal jokes. Well, it's just women's tennis. It's just women's tennis.
Yeah, that's what probably.
And you call, and like you hear some of the TV personalities and stuff make fun of them. They're like, look at those big muscles in that skirt. It looks like a man in a skirt. And you have to read into the signs that they're putting out there. Like with sports, it's a masculine sport, no matter what sport it is. Even then, like you have some people talking about cheerleaders, like they have to look good in their skirts and their outfits and stuff like that, but they still have to have the muscles to do what's required of them. And so it is, even though it is considered a girly kind of culture, they still have that masculinity involved in it.
What I've noticed, and it may have just been where I was, is that the tops on cheerleaders fit looser because they were losing that feminine upper body look. So they had a little bit of sleeve that covered their shoulders. The pep squad had the sleeveless.
Usually competing, if you look at competing cheerleading, they have long sleeves with cutouts
Yeah.
to create that feminine look.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you guys for your time again today, and if you guys have any more questions or comments, I think it really is important for us to take a critical look at what we're being exposed to and why it is that. And even now, I still think of, oh gosh, why do I think this? Why can't I not call cheerleading a sport? With
Just
every
the
fiber of my
society.
being, I grew up playing sports, but I cannot. What text made me think that way? And I think it's important for all of us to learn. So, thank you guys.
Thank you.